Hi, this is Elaine, and I'm talking about the first assignment. So, basics. You have to write a 1,500 word essay, obviously, and it's worth 20% of your mark. You'll find that the OASIS unit outline is out of date and has that as 30%. It's actually 20%. It's due Monday, week 6. So, in semester 2, that is 8th of September. Now, 1,500 words, give or take 10%. So that translates to plus 1,500 plus or minus 150 words. Okay, so I'm allowing a leeway there. Of course, like going a little bit over 1,500 is better than going under, because when you go under, you can find yourself lacking in detail and depth of analysis. So I will say go a little bit over. Don't try and bump up your word count for the sake of that. You must have something substantial to say, and I do look for conciseness. The essay question is, who should be allowed to filter the internet? Now there's a bit of confusion here about is the broad question this, who should be allowed to filter the net, or is the broad question one of these ones here? Well, I think what you should see it as, this is the big question that you're meant to be addressing. So you're going to make some very general statements about reasons for filtering the net, reasons against filtering the net, and reasons why certain agencies and government agencies and likewise may or may not be a good body to do that. So there are political, social, and other reasons that sort of impact upon your response to this question. So there's a very general thing going on there, and that is where you will pull together the discussions we've had so far, the readings that we've had so far. Some of them were quite specific to the Australian or US context, and some were not. But there are some general themes there that you should be pulling out in order to answer this question. However, like any good scholarly work, it's kind of not a good idea to keep too general. And that's the reason is because it's kind of very easy, too easy to make general statements. But once you get down to brass tacks and go to the detail, that's where your broader ideas are really tested out. And we can see really whether they work. So that's where you would select some of these. I wouldn't say don't address each and every one of these points. Select some, 2 or 3, 1 or 2 of these areas to look at, and then use this as examples, as ways to test out some of your broader ideas. Right? You go into detail, and that's where you will do some research into these specific situations. Like if you should pick the Australian government filtering the internet, you should be demonstrating your knowledge from your research and reading of the current situation today and any relevant historical stuff. All right? And all the surrounding ethical, cultural, political issues about that. Same with all these others. You should have some really good sound empirical information to back up your statements. So these are basically saying what I meant, what I was saying. You need not address all the questions, and you must also back it up properly. And it has recommendations there. And I've mentioned in the forum things like government reports, research institutions findings, things like that. Place them as first priority. You're looking for sound, scholarly, or kind of very valid material. Then you might go on to if you really finding it difficult to find that information, and there are all sorts of reasons why that information may not be forthcoming, then you would go and look up activist organizations and interest groups and stuff. They can produce good quality work, but it's not good for your essay to be prioritizing that work from the start. You need to go for other sources, other more solid sources as your first priority. Also, at this stage, I'm taking for granted that you'll be quite familiar with the usual essay structure, you know, having a good introduction that sets up your argument, having a conclusion that summarizes everything and pulls it out all together. It should be in paragraph, not point, not headings, you know, just paragraph, narrative paragraph form, and should be connected, be coherent, you know, so it shouldn't be jumping from point to point, and should be well organized. You have your topics organized topically, all that kind of thing is important. Here are the criteria for assessment, and I do tend to mark according to the criteria, so do pay attention to that. I will be paying attention to each and every one of these points. Okay, all well, very well and fine in theory, so let's get into what it should look like. Now this is a postgraduate level essay, so if some of you are feeling a little bit intimidated by that, remember that, you know, we're talking about 503 level assignment, but I thought it's also good to give you something that is a goal to aim for, because Net 303 or 503 level, you know, you can achieve good standards, and good standards like if you aim high enough. Now, okay, so this, one of the first things I want to point out is the obvious point that, you know, it's nice to have a good title that indicates the position that you're going to take up and the topic, right? You don't have to spell out everything, but you should indicate the stance you're taking up and the topic, right? So again, the introduction here very clearly setting out the question that he's addressing, some contextual stuff, and that's drawn from like the earlier part of our discussion, and he's specifically looking at David Cameron's government and rolling out a internet filter system here. So we've got the broad questions that he set out in the beginning, and then clearly indicating the specific question he's addressing. Now, like I said, it can be one, it can be two of the more specific case studies. And a thesis here. Now, you don't have to bold the thesis, as this comment by the assessor is saying. You know, you don't have to bold it, you know, but it should be clearly set out that, you know, your thesis, and you don't have to do it in a formatting type of way. You can, it should be clear in the way you phrase things. That's the argument you are making. Sometimes people bury the argument in the middle of all sorts of other details. So try and work towards a clearly indicated argument, and make sure that it organizes the rest of your essay. So just to give you an example from the first paragraph here, you can see what I meant by you are addressing the general question of who has the right to affect the net, to control and regulate the internet, right? And so this, as you can see, this student moves from broader issues, like for instance over here, has a statement that clearly states his position. You know, he calls it quick fix solution. Now that's a little bit emotive, but at least it is clear what kind of like position he's taking up there. And again, these are issues that are very broad. You know, moral panics and concerns about children being harmed by online predators. All these are broader issues. And as you can see, this student moves from these broader issues, which are important to address the big question, into more specific, like statements to do with the immediate context, the immediate case study. And that's kind of like the way I sort of like recommend that you approach this. You know, you address the big question, and then you move to the smaller question, the smaller situation and context that you're dealing with. And this student doesn't confine himself to just that specific context. And sometimes it is worth thinking of putting an example in there that is also relevant but isn't confined to that narrow context that you focus upon. Now, you might find it challenging to keep within a word limit that way. So I would prioritize big question, specific context, and then when you need to and you have the space, go into other examples, and these other examples are to show that these issues are not confined to just one context, just one country, just one situation. So that's what they're for, to show that it's also a broader issue. I won't go into this in big detail. I think like you know, if I'm going too fast, you can always like slow down, pause, and just see what the student is doing. Right now I'm just speeding towards the end here. So after having established his case by this sort of movement between the kind of big picture sort of issue to the more specific um, exploration of the specific context, the student then ends with a paragraph that pulls together these very specific concerns, the kind of findings and details that he's dug up through research, pulling it together with a broader statement about like internet filtering and regulation of the internet, right? So doesn't raise new points. So I think you've probably heard it many times before that a conclusion is not in a conclusion at university level isn't supposed to like point to the future as you may have been taught um, in high school and all that. It's meant to just tie up what you've already said and summarize what you have already said, and that's the main thing. And then like make a statement, repeat the argument that you are making about the question. And these are the kind of like sources this person has used. I wanted to show you the quality of sources. Yes, there's mix of sources, like there's Wired, there's the Independent newspaper, Wired again, activist organizations, but there's also some substantial ones. This is from the readings. There's something from First Monday, also I think the reading. And I think that nice balance between scholarly sources and other sources is good and fine, you know. So I'm not saying don't use these other sources, but to kind of make sure that you do have a balance there, and your paper cannot be accused of as being too reliant on kind of biased sources. Here we have First Monday, again, Business Times. So, you know, a good mix there to show a good breadth of information being used to come to the conclusion that you've arrived at. So, just to show that this is the kind of quality we're looking for at a 503 level, and certainly worth trying to strive towards, even if you are enrolled in Net303 level. Alright, I hope that clears things up. If you have any more questions, do try to post them to the forum. The reason for this being that I think it's important to share the kind of help that I'm giving. It's not because like I don't want to talk to you privately, and I will talk to you privately if you email me, but I kind of prefer it to be sort of more egalitarian, if I can put it that way, so that I know that everyone's receiving somewhat similar kind of like information. But you know, if you really feel uncomfortable with putting your questions online, you know, some people feel like that they don't that maybe everyone else is working at a different level from them, or their questions are not relevant to them. So yeah, ask me the questions online or through email.